The sun beat down relentlessly on the barren desert, its fiery rays turning the sand into an endless sea of waves. The team of human explorers trudged through the harsh terrain, their boots sinking slightly into the scorching ground with every step. Captain Kale wiped sweat from his brow, scanning the horizon with a pair of binoculars. The landscape stretched out before them, nothing but sand, rock, and the occasional twisted cactus. The planet they had landed on, known as Stories, was a desolate wasteland, largely unexplored and full of mysteries. For days, the explorers had been searching for something, anything, that could explain why this planet had once been home to an advanced alien civilization. The mission was supposed to be routine: gather data, study the geology, and leave. But something was off. There was more to Stories than met the eye. Then it happened. As they set up camp near a rocky outcrop, one of the explorers, Jenna, noticed something unusual in the sky. It wasn't a bird or a satellite. It was a faint, flickering signal, too strong to be natural, too weak to be from a modern communications network. She immediately flagged Captain Kell over. "Captain, look at this," Jenna said, her voice a mix of excitement and curiosity. Kale took the handheld device she handed him, his fingers quickly typing commands. The signal grew stronger, more distinct, until words slowly began to form on the small screen. "Help me, please. Zorali. Oasis. Hidden beneath the sands. Danger. They are coming." The message was garbled, cut off by static. But one thing was clear. It was a distress signal. The name Zorali echoed in Cal's mind. He had read about ancient alien princesses in their reports, but nothing had ever indicated that one might be alive, let alone trapped on a dead planet. The rest of the message only confirmed his suspicions. This was no ordinary communication. It came from someone, or something, in serious danger. "What the hell?" Kale muttered under his breath. The crew gathered around him as he repeated the message. There was a mix of disbelief and excitement. Everyone knew how dangerous it was to explore unknown parts of the galaxy, but this was an opportunity none of them could ignore. The mention of an oasis was especially intriguing. No one had believed such a place even existed on Stories. "Can we triangulate the location?" Kale asked, already considering the next steps. Jenna nodded. She adjusted the device, inputting the necessary data. "The signal is coming from somewhere deep in the desert," she said, pointing to the coordinates on the map. "About 50 kilometers south. It's isolated, but it's there." Kale made a decision in that instant. "We're going there. Pack up. We leave at first light." As the team prepared for their journey, no one could have predicted what lay ahead. The desert was harsh and unforgiving, but there was something calling to them, pulling them toward an unknown fate. A princess in distress, an ancient oasis, a mystery buried beneath the sands. And one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The humans had just stumbled upon something much bigger than they could have imagined, and their adventure was only beginning. The desert was unforgiving, and the journey had taken its toll on the human explorers. The heat was unbearable during the day, and the cold was biting during the night. Their water supplies were running low, and they could feel the weight of the endless sand pressing down on them. But the signal they had received kept them going. The thought of the mysterious oasis, hidden deep in the desert, was all they could think about. Captain Kale led the team, his face set in determination. The sand dunes stretched endlessly before them, but he had a feeling they were close. The coordinates from the signal had been precise, and according to their maps, they were just a few miles from the oasis now. As they pressed forward, the landscape began to change. The dry, cracked earth gradually gave way to patches of green. Kale squinted into the distance, his heart racing. "What is that?" Jenna asked, her voice filled with awe. Ahead of them, nestled between two towering cliffs, a sight unlike anything they had ever seen appeared. A lush oasis, vibrant and full of life. The air was thick with moisture, a stark contrast to the dry, arid desert they had crossed. Trees with large, colorful leaves swayed gently in the breeze, and the sounds of rushing water could be heard in the distance. It was like stepping into another world entirely. "This is it," Kale murmured. "The oasis. It's real." The team wasted no time in approaching the water. After days of dehydration, they eagerly filled their canteens and drank deeply from the cool, fresh water. They marveled at the unexpected beauty of the place. But as they moved deeper into the oasis, they began to notice something strange. There were signs of an ancient civilization, massive stone structures, worn by time, but still standing tall. The architecture was unlike anything the humans had ever seen, alien in design, with strange symbols carved into the walls. This is incredible," said Marcus, the team's tech specialist, running his hands over the surface of the stones. "It's like they were built for something, or someone, important." They continued their exploration, moving toward the center of the oasis. And then they found it. A large, towering palace, covered in vines and moss, its grand entrance wide open, as if welcoming them. The air around it felt different, almost electric. As they stepped inside, the temperature dropped, and the atmosphere felt thick with mystery. Inside the palace, the team found an unexpected surprise. In the middle of the grand hall stood a figure, a woman, her body glowing faintly in the dim light. She was standing still, her eyes closed, as if in a deep trance. She wore nothing but a shimmering, iridescent skin that shimmered in the light. She appeared to be an alien, but there was something regal about her, a presence that filled the entire room. It was her, the princess. Her name was Zorali. Kale stepped forward, his voice hesitant. "Princess Zorali." Her eyes snapped open, revealing bright, otherworldly colors. She looked at them, confusion in her gaze, but then something shifted. Recognition. She stepped closer, her voice soft and alien yet somehow familiar. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "We are humans," Kale replied, his heart racing. "We received your signal. We've come to help." Zorali blinked, then slowly nodded. You came for me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting. For so long." The team exchanged glances. The alien princess, the one who had sent the mysterious signal, was real. But there was something about her, something hidden behind her eyes, that made them wonder what had brought her here, to this forgotten palace, all alone. And as Zorali began to tell them her story, the teen realized that the truth of what had happened to her, and the incredible power she possessed, was far beyond anything they could have imagined. The oasis was only the beginning. Zorali sat on a stone bench, her eyes distant as she gazed out over the oasis. The humans gathered around her, unsure of how to begin. The silence between them felt heavy, as if the air itself was waiting for something. Captain Kale finally broke it, his voice calm but curious. "Princess Zorali, we're here to help you. But we need to know how you ended up here. What happened to you?" Zorali took a deep breath, her glowing skin shifting ever so slightly with the movement. She closed her eyes for a moment, as if searching for the right words, before speaking in a soft, almost sorrowful voice. "My story begins long ago, on my home planet, Xantaria," she said. "I was once a princess, the heir to a great empire. My people were advanced beyond most other races. Our technology, our knowledge, we ruled over many worlds. But power breeds envy, and not all my people were happy with my family's rule." She paused, her fingers lightly tracing the carvings on the stone beside her. "I was young when it all changed. My own family betrayed me. My uncle, the general of the Xantari military, led a coup. He took control of the empire, and in his eyes, I was a threat, an obstacle to his rule. He exiled me here, to this desert planet, and left me to die." The humans listened in stunned silence. Captain Kale stepped forward, his expression a mix of sympathy and a disbelief. "You were betrayed by your own family?" he asked, his voice gentle. "But how did you survive here, alone, all this time?" Zorali's eyes flickered with pain, but there was a quiet strength behind them. "I did not survive alone," she said softly. "When they exiled me, they thought I was powerless. But they were wrong. My people, we have abilities beyond your understanding. Our minds are connected to the stars, and we can harness the energy of the universe itself. But even with such power, I could not stop what happened." She looked down at her hands, the shimmering glow fading slightly. "I was left here, abandoned, with no memory of why I was brought to this place. For years, I wandered, trapped in a haze, until one day I began to hear whispers, voices calling to me from the desert. They led me to this oasis. The palace was hidden beneath the sands, waiting for me. But there was more. Something was calling to me from within." Zorali's voice grew more urgent. "I am not the only one who knows about this place. There are others, enemies of my people who are seeking the power hidden here. The artifact within this palace is more than just a treasure. It holds the key to unimaginable power. The power to reshape entire galaxies." The team exchanged uneasy glances. Captain Kale's mind raced. "An artifact? What kind of power are we talking about? And why is it so important?" Zorali stood slowly, her eyes darkening. "The artifact is a weapon. It was created by an ancient race, one that predated even my people. The creators of this weapon believed that only those pure of heart could unlock its power. It was meant to be a test, a way to determine who would wield it. The problem is, the wrong hands could use it to destroy entire civilizations." Kale nodded. "And that's why the signal. You wanted help." "Yes," Zorali whispered. "I sent the signal, hoping that someone with the right intentions, would come. You are my hope. But the enemies who exiled me are not far behind. They have learned of this place. The Korath, my uncle's allies, they are coming. If they reach the artifact before we do, everything will be lost." The weight of her words hung in the air, the tension building. The team now understood the true gravity of their situation. This wasn't just about finding an ancient alien princess. This was about saving the galaxy from a terrible unseen threat. Kale turned to his team, his voice steady. "We can't let them get to it first. We have to protect this place." Zorali nodded, her eyes filled with a quiet, unspoken trust. "I believe you, but we must act quickly. The clock is ticking." And with that, the real battle began. The tension in the air was thick as the team gathered around Zorali, trying to process the gravity of her words. The Korath were on their way, and if they reached the palace first, it would mean the end of everything. Captain Kale stood at the front, his mind racing. He had faced enemies before, pirates, mercenaries, even alien species, but this was something different. The Korath weren't just a threat to one planet or one people. They could destroy entire systems with the right weapon. "We need a plan," Kale said, his voice steady despite the weight of their situation. "But we don't have much time. Zorali, you said the artifact's power could reshape entire galaxies. How do we stop the Korath from getting their hands on it?" Zorali stood still for a moment, her glowing eyes deep in thought. "The artifact is hidden in the deepest chamber of the palace. Only someone who has the right intentions can access it. But it's not just a matter of who can get there. The palace is full of traps, built to keep out anyone who isn't worthy. You will have to navigate them." Kale nodded. He was used to challenges, but this was different. The idea of facing ancient alien technology and traps was daunting, especially with an enemy like the Korath breathing down their necks. But then something Zorali said sparked an idea. "What if we're not the ones who need to solve this?" Kale asked, turning to his team. "What if the advantage we have is being human?" The group looked at him, confused. Kale continued, his mind working through the possibilities. "Humanity has always been adaptable. We don't rely solely on technology or brute strength. We think on our feet. We find solutions where others see dead ends. The Korath, they're strong and technologically advanced, yes, but they lack the resourcefulness that we have. Zorelli looked at him curiously, as if she had never considered such a thing. You think your people have a chance against the Korath? Not just a chance, Kale said with a grin. We've got something better. We've got ingenuity. Jenna, the team's communications expert, stepped forward. And we got tech. If we can modify the palace's systems, we might be able to disable the traps or reprogram them to work in our favor. Exactly, Kale said. Marcus, you're our tech specialist. Can you work with Zorali's knowledge of the palace? If we can rewire the security, we might be able to turn it against the Korath. Marcus nodded, already pulling out his tools. I can do that. It'll take some time, but with Zorelli's help, I think we can get through most of the defenses. Zorelli nodded slowly, understanding the human way of thinking. I'll guide you. I know the palace better than anyone, but I can't promise that the artifact will be easy to reach. It's not just about getting through the traps. It's about being worthy. Cal's eyes softened with empathy. We'll find a way. Together. With a new sense of purpose, the team set to work. They worked quickly, modifying their equipment to work with the alien technology of the palace. Marcus, with Zorelli's help, began to hack into the systems, reprogramming the security measures. Meanwhile, the rest of the team prepared for what lay ahead. The journey into the heart of the palace and the unknown dangers that awaited them. As the hours passed, the oasis remained eerily quiet. The Korath hadn't arrived yet, but Kale knew it was only a matter of time. Every minute counted. Despite the danger, there was a sense of unity among the team. They had come together to face an impossible situation, and for the first time, they felt like they were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something greater. Kale looked over at Zorelli, who stood by, watching them work. She had once been the heir to an empire, a princess with unimaginable power. But now, she stood among humans, relying on their ingenuity to save her people and her world. It was clear to him then, humanity might not have the raw power of the Zantari or the Korath, but they had something just as powerful. The ability to adapt, to work together, and to rise above impossible odds. And that, Kale thought with a sense of quiet confidence, would be enough. The sun was setting over the oasis, casting long shadows across the palace. Kale stood at the entrance, looking out at the vast desert beyond. The team had worked relentlessly to prepare. Marcus and Zorelli had managed to reprogram most of the palace's defense systems, turning the ancient traps into barriers for the Korath. The sense of urgency was palpable. Every second felt like it was stretching longer than the last. Captain, Jenna said as she approached, her voice tense. I've been monitoring the area. They're close. The Korath have landed. It won't be long before they reach the palace. Cal's heart raced. They had no time left. Get ready, he said, his voice steady but urgent. We move out in 5 minutes. We have to reach the artifact first. The team quickly assembled, their gear ready and weapons at hand. Zorelli stood apart from them, her glowing skin dimming as if she were deep in concentration. She had been quiet for the past hour, her mind clearly racing as she thought about the dangers ahead. Are you sure you want to do this? Kale asked, walking over to her. Zorelli turned to him, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and fear. I must. The Korath cannot be allowed to reach the artifact. They will misuse its power and destroy everything. My people, my empire, they are counting on me to stop them. Kale nodded. He understood her pain. We're with you, Zorelli. You're not alone in this. With a final nod, Zorelli led the way into the heart of the palace. The walls were ancient, covered in symbols that hummed faintly with energy. The air felt thick, almost alive, as if the palace itself was waiting for something. The team moved cautiously through the darkened halls, the only light coming from their flashlights and the soft glow of Zorali's skin. As they reached the first set of doors, Zorali raised her hand, signaling for them to stop. She closed her eyes and focused, and a low hum echoed through the chamber. A set of massive stone doors slowly began to open, revealing a large hall beyond. The team entered, weapons raised, ready for anything. The palace was silent, save for the soft sound of their footsteps. They had barely taken a few steps when the first trap triggered. Suddenly, the floor beneath them began to shift, and the walls closed in, threatening to crush them. "Move," Kale shouted. The team sprinted forward, dodging the narrowing walls. Jenna managed to hack into the system, temporarily disabling the trap, and the walls stopped moving just in time. "That was too close," Marcus panted, his eyes wide with adrenaline. Zorali didn't break her focus. She was already moving forward, leading them deeper into the palace. "We're getting closer," she said, her voice calm despite the danger. "But we must be careful. The final chamber is protected by more than just traps. It is protected by the artifact itself." Kel's mind raced. He could feel the pressure mounting. The Korath would soon be here, and if they didn't reach the artifact in time, all would be lost. They had no choice but to press on. But as they neared the final chamber, they heard a sound that froze them in place, the unmistakable hum of alien engines. The Korath had arrived. "Get to the artifact," Kale ordered, his voice tight with urgency. Now, the team ran down the long corridor toward the chamber. The doors ahead of them stood tall and imposing, but they had no time to waste. Zorali stepped forward, her hand raised. The ancient symbols on the door began to glow, and with a soft click, the doors slowly creaked open. But as they entered the chamber, a chilling realization struck them all. The Korath were already there. A group of heavily armed soldiers stood in the center of the room, weapons drawn. At the far end of the chamber, bathed in a soft, ethereal light, stood the artifact, a glowing crystal pulsing with energy. One of the Korath soldiers, tall and imposing, stepped forward. His eyes were cold, calculating. "You are too late," he said, his voice low and filled with menace. "The artifact is ours now." Kel's grip tightened on his weapon. The battle for the galaxy was about to begin. The Korath soldiers stood between the humans and the artifact, their weapons raised, ready for combat. Kel's heart raced as he assessed the situation. There were 5 Korath, all heavily armored and armed with energy rifles. They stood between him and the glowing crystal, which pulsed with a power that seemed to resonate deep within the chamber. Zorali stepped forward, her expression hardening. "You can't have it," she said, her voice strong, but with a hint of fear beneath it. "It's not meant for your kind." The Korath leader, a tall, broad-shouldered alien with sharp, predatory features, sneered. "And who are you to stop us, princess?" He growled. "Your people failed. The artifact belongs to us now." Without warning, the Korath soldiers raised their weapons and fired. Energy blasts whizzed past the humans, narrowly missing them as they dove for cover. The entire chamber shook as the intense beams of light exploded against the stone walls, leaving smoldering holes in their wake. "Move. Get to cover," Kale shouted, his voice steady under pressure. He grabbed Zorali's arm, pulling her behind a pillar. The rest of the team scattered, taking cover wherever they could find it. "Jenna, Marcus, can you disable their weapons?" Kale asked, peering around the pillar. Jenna was already working her tech, fingers flying across her device as she attempted to hack into the Korath's communication systems. "I'm trying," she called back, "but their tech is shielded. It's not easy." Kale glanced over to see Marcus ducking behind a nearby pillar, his eyes focused as he aimed his own energy rifle at a Korath soldier. "I can cover you," Marcus shouted. "Just give me a second." Kale nodded, then turned to Zorali. "We need to get closer to the artifact. Can you help us?" Zorali's eyes narrowed as she focused on the glowing crystal in the center of the room. She closed her eyes, her hands glowing faintly as she reached out with her mind, tapping into the energy around them. The air in the chamber grew thick with power, a palpable buzz of ancient energy. The Korath soldiers seemed momentarily distracted by her sudden display of power. "They won't reach the artifact unless we allow it," Zorali said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. She raised her hands, and the ground beneath the Korath soldiers began to tremble. The soldiers staggered, trying to keep their balance. A sudden crack split the floor open, and one of the Korath fell into the widening gap. The others stumbled backward, momentarily thrown off balance. "Now's our chance," Kale shouted. He motioned to his team, signaling for them to move. With Zorali holding the Korath back, the humans rushed forward, moving quickly but cautiously. The Korath soldiers regained their footing, but they were slow to react. Marcus took the lead, firing his rifle at the nearest soldier, hitting him square in the chest. The soldier crumpled to the ground, temporarily stunned. The rest of the team followed suit, taking down the remaining Korath soldiers with quick, precise shots. The battle was fierce, but the Korath's reliance on brute strength and weapons was no match for the humans' adaptability and teamwork. Zorali kept her focus on the artifact, her eyes glowing brighter as she concentrated on the ancient energy flowing through the chamber. With every passing moment, the power in the room seemed to grow stronger, as if the artifact itself was reacting to her presence. As Kale ducked behind a pillar to reload, he glanced at Zorali. "We're almost there," he said. "Just a little more. We need to get to the artifact before the Korath regroup." Zorali nodded, her face set in determination. "We cannot let them have it. It is the only way to stop the destruction they will bring." The last Korath soldier was taken down, and the chamber fell into an eerie silence. Kale and his team moved forward cautiously, with Zorali leading them toward the artifact. As they approached, the glowing crystal seemed to pulse faster, as if sensing their presence. But just as Kale reached out to touch it, a low growl echoed from the shadows. The Korath leader was still alive. With a roar, he charged at them, his armor glowing with dark energy. "You think you've won?" He spat. "You're nothing but insects." Kale barely had time to react before the Korath leader swung a massive, glowing energy blade toward him. The blade struck the ground with a deafening clash, sending a shockwave through the room. The fight was far from over. The Korath leader, still alive and filled with rage, charged at Kale. His massive energy blade glowed with an ominous light, casting strange shadows across the chamber. Kale barely had time to react as the leader swung it down, the powerful weapon crashing against the stone floor where Kale had just been standing. "Move," Kale shouted, diving out of the way just in time. The force of the blade hitting the ground sent cracks running through the floor, making the entire chamber shake. Zorali was already preparing to defend herself. Her glowing hands reached out, trying to tap into the palace's ancient power, but the Korath leader was too quick. With a terrifying roar, he lunged toward her, his blade aimed straight at her chest. "No," Kale shouted. He rolled to his feet, grabbing his own weapon, and fired a blast of energy at the Korath leader. The shot hit the leader's armor, but it barely slowed him down. Zorali, however, didn't wait for Kale. With a surge of energy, she reached out and formed a protective shield around herself, deflecting the next strike. The Korath leader's blade hit the shield with a loud crack, sending sparks flying into the air. "You can't stop me, princess," the Korath leader snarled. His glowing eyes burned with fury as he raised his blade again. But Zorali's eyes were filled with focus. She pushed herself forward, using the palace's power to amplify her strength. The ground beneath her feet trembled as she summoned energy from the very heart of the chamber. With a loud cry, Zorali thrust her hands forward. A wave of brilliant light exploded from her, crashing into the Korath leader. He staggered backward, his energy blade knocked from his hands as the powerful force sent him flying across the room. He slammed into the far wall, collapsing to the floor in a heap. The team watched, stunned by the force of Zorali's attack. For a moment, the room was still, the only sound the crackling energy in the air. Kale wasted no time. "We need to finish this," he said, his voice filled with urgency. The Korath leader was down, but he wasn't out. The team moved quickly, rushing toward the artifact, their eyes fixed on the glowing crystal that seemed to pulse with energy, as if calling to them. Zorali, still shaking from the intensity of her power, led the way. "We have to act fast," she said. "The artifact is only accessible to those with pure intentions, but if we don't unlock it soon, the Korath will recover." Kale nodded. He could hear the Korath leader starting to stir behind them, his growls filled with anger and pain. They didn't have much time. As the team approached the artifact, the crystal began to glow brighter. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in, as if reacting to the presence of the artifact. Zorali stepped forward, placing her hands above the crystal. "I'm ready," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were full of determination. She focused, drawing on the power she had once known, reaching out to the artifact. The air around them hummed with energy as the crystal responded, opening up like a flower, revealing a swirling vortex of light inside. The Korath leader was still recovering, but his eyes burned with fury. "No, you won't stop us," he shouted, charging at them once more, his body glowing with dark energy. But it was too late. Zorali's connection to the artifact was complete. With a final surge of power, the crystal erupted in a brilliant burst of light, enveloping the entire chamber. The Korath leader screamed as the light surrounded him, and his body was consumed by the energy, disintegrating into nothing. The room fell silent once again, the light of the artifact slowly fading. The danger was over. The team stood in awe, staring at the now calm, glowing crystal. The artifact had fulfilled its purpose. Zorali breathed a sigh of relief, her hands dropping to her sides. "It's done," she said softly. "The Korath are no more. The artifact has chosen." Kale stepped forward, looking at the princess with admiration. "You did it. You saved us all." Zorali looked at the team, her expression softening. "We did it. Together. Your people. They are more than I expected." Kale smiled. "Humanity's greatest strength isn't just in our weapons or our technology. It's in our ability to fight for what's right, even when the odds are against us." As they stood in the heart of the ancient palace, Kale realized the truth of Zorali's words. The battle had been won, not just with strength, but with unity, trust, and determination. The galaxy was safe, for now. But the journey they had started together would change everything. Humanity had proven once again that against all odds, they could rise to meet any challenge. And as the team made their way out of the palace, they knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together.